Welcome to the show, Vicki. I want you, before we jump into what I know is going to be an incredible conversation about something that is super, super important, I want you to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Hi, I'm Vicki. I have a history of being a physical therapist who moved into leadership, who then moved into IT, who then became a coach. And now I am mostly a professional speaker and a coach. And I talk about a couple of different things. One is all about who we're being and how we show up, and this idea that leadership is not a role, position, or a title. It's who we are. And we are all leaders. And I kind of focus this on the world of healthcare because there's a lot going on in healthcare, and each and every one of us has so much around us that we just need to focus on who we're being, and we can actually have a better impact and do better things in the workplace and feel better about who we are and what we're doing.
I love it. I love it too, because I spend a lot of my time in the leadership world too, but I do not touch leadership in healthcare. And it is so needed. I know there's a lot of news going on currently right now around healthcare and leadership. And it's important for people to step into and understand what being a leader is, because when you understand what being a leader is, you understand your impact and how to have that impact. So I love that you're in this space doing this work.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Awareness of who you are is just, it's just important.
It is. Okay. So share with us and the listeners a little bit about your work do you want to talk about in the healthcare space? That is where you spend most of your time.
It is where I spend most of my time. So what I really like, okay, we're going to talk about the coaching bit of it.
Okay. I love it.
When I'm coaching people, what I'm really helping people do is see that, the things that happen, the insurance companies, the authorizations, the unhappy patients, clients, staff members, that what we all do is we react to that stuff.
Yes.
And when we start to notice our reactions, which is really interesting, am I getting angry? Am I frustrated? Do I shut down? Do I withdraw? Do I look for win-wins? Everybody has a different kind of reaction to everything that happens.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can take a step back and be like, oh, I just got really ticked off. What was that about? Mm-hmm. And stop getting upset with ourselves, but just recognize. Okay, full confession. I'm dealing with some issues taking care of my mom. And I had a really interesting reaction at the hospital the other day where I kind of lost it.
Yeah.
And in retrospect, I took a look at it. I'm like, why did I get so angry? Mm-hmm. I got angry because I felt like I was out of control, that I was afraid. And it's really interesting. And then I reflected on what that said about me and how I could use that to grow and to learn and to recognize, again, I was just having a reaction. And right. I stepped back and I took a look at it, and I made a couple apologies.
Yeah.
But it was interesting because, even if we understand all this stuff, it doesn't mean we're immune to it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I really like people to understand, is that when you're reacting to the angry staff member, or when you have this thing that's been this budget that's been given to you that you didn't want, that you are going to react, and that's okay. But take some moments and look at what you're doing and see if it's the choice you want to make. If I had been able to choose the other day, that's not what I would have done. And did it actually get me what I needed? And the answer was yes. I got somebody to pay attention to my mother, and the care got provided. Could I have done it differently? Sure. Would I next time? Probably.
But I think what's really helpful here is that everyone has these stories in everyday life, and they have these stories when dealing with healthcare. I know I just got switched. My prescription just got switched for reasons that it needed to. But now my insurance doesn't cover it. I just got a bill, and I was like, I can't pay $600 a month for this. And so my reaction was immediate, and I had to stop and pause and go, okay, what can I do with this information now, right? That's what that pause and reflection is. It's what can I do with this information?
Yeah. And it's because one of the things that happens is we get so caught up in the reaction. Mm-hmm. And the reaction is just, reactions last and those motions last about 90 seconds. But if we can like not get caught in the reaction and the distraction and the perseveration on that, then we can actually take that moment and be like, oh, what is this information? This is a $600 bill.
Right.
Okay. What choice do I have? And that's the thing that I love to talk to people about, is like choice. We have way more choices. We are so powerful because we can always choose our response.
Right.
When we take the moment to choose our response.
Right. And when we understand that we have that choice, we have the autonomy. We don't always feel like we have the agency to do those things.
Right.
Because we don't stop. We live in the reactive.
Yes. And so in healthcare, there's so many things, there's so much that's coming at people. And I'm going to go off on a little, is my healthcare is supposed to be about taking care of people.
Yes.
Healthcare doesn't exist without
Full stop.
Yeah. There's somebody who needs help, and usually we call them a patient. We might call them a client. We might call them a human.
Yes.
And there's somebody who is engaged in taking care of them. This is it. This is healthcare. These two entities. And everything else, in my opinion, is supposed to be in support of those two entities. Now, that may be a physician, it may be a nurse practitioner, it may be a physical therapist. It honestly, it may be the person who cleans and sanitizes the OR.
Right. Because that matters.
But yeah, and those are the things that are important. Everything else should be in support of that. So when the developer is creating technology that works on the EMR, or that connects the cart to the EMR, or that takes the vital signs and puts them into, some sort of visual platform, all of that is supposed to be in support of this and this.
Right.
And that's one of my other big things, is that I want people to understand that everything that we do is supposed to be in support of those two entities.
So, because it seems so simple to me, and I'm sure anyone listening is going, well, yeah, that's what healthcare is supposed to be. So I pose the question to you, and you may or may not have an answer. You might have opinions. What is making it so convoluted? What is making it so hard and not as simple as patient healer, patient helper?
I think one of the biggest problems is whenever you read about, you're looking in the media and you're reading about healthcare, they are not actually talking about the care of health and people. They're talking about payment models. And one of the biggest challenges is the way we pay for healthcare. And I'm not going to pretend I have an answer. I am going to talk about identifying some of the challenges. And it's, we have Medicare and we have Medicaid. And, there are certain criteria you have to meet to get that kind of coverage. Most of people who are under 65, their healthcare payments are through their employer's insurance benefit plan. And those are like, it's countless numbers of versions of what they have. Employers are trying to manage these kinds of plans and get the best value for their dollars. And there are whole departments in organizations that just are trying to figure out health insurance for people. And then there are those of us who are solopreneurs or entrepreneurs, and we're getting our insurance or our coverage through a completely different avenue. I have friends who are entrepreneurs who just don't have coverage.
Right.
They just hope they don't have
the model's not set up for us.
Right. They hope they don't have something catastrophic happen because they have literally no coverage.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it is just this underlying angst of what if I need care and how is care going to be paid for? And there is a disconnect. And that disconnect is insurance companies. Here, let's get my hand. Insurance companies, their purpose is to provide value to shareholders.
Yeah.
So I actually have a couple of things I've been thinking about this week with this one, but the value to shareholders, which means they need to make money, which means they don't need to spend money on care.
It's a money model. Yes.
But do you know what shareholders are?
Us.
They're humans.
I know.
So thinking about shareholders, and I like this.
I'm not a shareholder in this capacity, but yes, it is us. It is people.
Right. It is human beings are shareholders. And so I'm like, how do we help the insurance companies recognize that, yes, they want to provide shareholder value monetarily, but maybe if we help insurance companies and the shareholders have more personal understanding of what it's like to be somebody who receives care,
Mhm.
and to have the angst of, was watching something this morning that's, there's a financial angst. I can't remember exactly what he called it, but there's a financial angst that is related specifically to healthcare.
Mm.
If we can help people recognize that that actually adds to the detriment of our health, and if we can somehow help insurance companies recognize that they are a big player in the care of health, not just shareholder value, but that those shareholders are humans and we want to take care of those humans. And if we start to have humans who have more personal experiences and understanding in healthcare,
Yeah.
or not healthcare.
Well, and what I've always thought was really interesting, a nuance to this, because it's my work in the happiness and wellness field, right? Is we know that when employees are healthier, they cost companies less money. So even though it's a money game happening in a department of these huge companies, a there is a motivation for them to want to keep their employees healthy. So there is an ROI on it that I'm not sure is always taken into account, because you do want to invest in the health of your employees.
Mm-hmm.
And that requires investing money. And the more you invest there, the greater return of investment for your company's bottom line.
Yeah. People are more productive when they are healthy.
Yes.
Yeah, there's lots of evidence to that. And so, and it's, taking care of the human being to make them healthy and to make them satisfied will improve your organization, whether it's a hospital, a PT clinic, or the insurance companies themselves.
Yeah.
We're all working.
So we see how insurance plays into this. I'm going to try maybe make it a little even more nuanced, because there are a lot of faces of healthcare. What about the person when I call to pay my bill? Like, what is that person's role in the healthcare? Or maybe not even money. What is when I schedule an appointment? Because that's a human interaction that's about my health too. And that all plays into this. And I know you touch all of this in your work.
Yes. I love this. This is one of the things that I'm like, regardless of your position, if you interact with human beings, you are providing care.
Yes.
And again, it goes back to, who are you being in this moment? Are you being an angry person? Are you a happy person? Are you listening? Are you being present? What's distracting you from being able to interact? Because I've had amazing interactions with people who demonstrate, who have no power to do anything except be kind.
Right.
And that's fantastic. And then I've also had interactions with people who, I'm so sorry, I don't actually have time to talk to you right now. I'm curious about what's going on with my mom, and you have just indicated to me that my mom is not important, but your job is to take care of my mom.
Right.
And it's like, it's understanding that you have this ability to impact regardless. I mean, I have to tell you a great interaction that I had.
Yeah.
It was the woman who was cleaning my mom's room. Now, my mom was getting ready to move to a different floor, but I had spilled water on the floor. Not the patient. I dropped water all over the floor. Yeah. And I asked her, I was like, can you clean this up? And she came in and she's like, well, do you want me to do anything else while I'm here? I mean, I can clean up the floor, but I can take out the trash. I'm like, and she's like, sometimes I don't necessarily hear what people are saying. So let me make sure I understood what you needed.
Yeah.
She was lovely and amazing. And obviously this was 2 weeks ago. And I'm still thinking about how she acted and what she did to support this random situation where I had spilled water all over the floor.
Right.
Everybody has
it wasn't about the task. It was about you and what you needed.
Right.
Okay. So this is my favorite part. What does it look like? What does the world look like? What does healthcare look like if we all step into our roles as leaders, if we all step into that capacity to see one another as human?
Well, it looks a lot less harried and frenzied. Because that's the other thing is that you find is like, it doesn't take more time to be kind.
Right.
It doesn't take more time to acknowledge somebody else. We actually need to put a pause on this because my mother is calling me.
So, what does the world look like? What does healthcare look like when we do interact as human to human, when we are showing up in our full capacity as leaders and humans?
So it looks a lot kinder.
Yeah.
It looks like people just taking that moment to reflect on how would I want to be treated and how do I want to feel when I'm taking care of somebody. You know, it doesn't take more time to listen and to be kind. But I'd like to imagine that the people who work in the finance side of things, and the people who work in Rev Cycle, and the people who work 6 steps away from actually interacting with the people who receive care,
Yeah.
I would really like them to have a perspective of what it's like to be cared for.
Yeah.
So that they have an understanding, but that they don't have to get it by being in the hospital themselves or by having to seek out care themselves. My vision is that everybody actually understands and focuses on patient and the person who's providing care. So I have this idea, and this idea is that regardless of your position and regardless of the topic of conversation regarding healthcare, that the first thing anybody in the room asks is, how does this impact the person receiving care and the person providing care? Start there. How is this topic or whatever we're talking about matter here?
Yeah.
And then we talk about the topic at hand. Now, we can't always make choices that we want to. There are constraints. There are logistical constraints and physical constraints and financial constraints. And I get that. Those are always going to exist.
Yeah.
But if we start every conversation with how does this impact this relationship,
Right.
I think it would help. I think it would make things go a long way so
Yeah.
that everybody in the system recognizes how that works.
Yeah. Well, and it goes back to purpose, like, right? Like, one of the 8 pillars of happiness is purpose. When you understand your purpose in any given moment or situation, then
Yes.
you can behave accordingly and align to that purpose. It's Simon Sinek's Start With Why, right? Like, if you understand your role in the impact, then you show up differently. And you can do that authentically. It's not a scripted, I have to do this. It's how do I show up aligned to this greater purpose?
You just reminded me of something that I used to start meetings out with. It's
Yeah.
like, what is your purpose? So I did this within the home health agency. What is your purpose towards patient care? So we would have the office staff meetings, so the intake staff and the billing staff and the schedulers, and they all were like, oh, well, I do this, which enhances patient care.
Right.
It took them moments, but it was this brilliant sort of and then we moved into the meeting. So there was a shared purpose. There was a shared, this is how we all contribute. And that's what every point of this conversation is about.
Yes. Yeah, I do that a lot with my clients in organizations, right? It is actually one of the power ups that I go to a lot. It is when you need to supercharge engagement and productivity, you have to tie people's roles, their reason for being in the room on that project at that company, to their purpose and how that ties to the greater picture. What are we trying to do together? And what is my individual role in the collective?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm all for that. And I try to do that. I mean, I don't actually work for, I try to do that with my clients now.
Right.
It's like, why are you at this organization? Why do you have the job that you have? How does it create meaning for you? And tap into that, or help them figure out that they may have some other purposes, other places.
Right. So when you have that conversation, so tying this back to what you said with the financial side of patient care, right? So when someone in one of those roles understands how their work, how their purpose is tied to the healthcare of a human, what does that change?
Well, there's an attitude shift. There's this idea that, oh, I matter more than I thought that I did.
Yeah.
And then when we feel like we matter, we perform better and we're more satisfied.
Yes. Yes.
because you've got this internal thing. It's not this somebody telling me I have to do something. And you feel like you have a purpose. I've also, I've worked with people who've done jobs where they're like, oh, the purpose of my role is something that doesn't align with me.
Right. I've been there. That was
Yeah.
my
And
whole work career. Yeah.
yeah, and then they make a shift, they make a change.
Right.
They're like, oh, I totally get why I'm not satisfied and why I'm unhappy. It's because this thing is not who I
Right.
am.
Right.
And
And you can be really good at that thing.
right.
But if it does not align with the purpose that feels authentic and tied to your value system, you're going
Yeah.
to get burnt out. You're going to be unhappy. You're not going to show up as your best.
And I have a story about that related to a not-for-profit versus a for-profit company.
Yeah.
I had a woman that I know who worked for not-for-profits, and it got acquired and blah, blah, blah. And so she ends up working for a for-profit healthcare company. And she figured out after about 6 months that it didn't align with her values.
Yeah.
So she went off and she has never returned to for-profit healthcare again.
Right. Right. And that's, and what's interesting is I think a lot of times when we make those big shifts, we think there's judgment, external judgment about those big shifts, right? Like, I'm leaving this for this reason. But it's all about alignment. And I want everyone I know to feel aligned in their work. There is no judgment. I want you to show up as your best. And I think at the end of the day, it goes back to this whole conversation. When we see one another as humans in whatever role and whatever capacity we are in, then it changes how we treat one another. And it actually strips away the judgment. And it strips away a lot of that negative stuff and angst that we carry with us.
Yes. And when we start to see that, I don't want to start a whole new conversation here, but it's when we start to see that, I think there's also some interesting thing about AI.
Yeah.
And am I interacting with a human or am I interacting with AI? And I think we need to start recognizing and being aware of who we're being and how we're acting when we think we're interacting with a human versus interacting with AI.
Yeah.
And I think this is a whole nother thing is clearly in development within, just chatbots on internet and,
right.
And I don't know what it is, but I'm going with the assumption that this AI bot, I need to be nice to them too.
Well, yeah, because we should never as humans change who we are based on the external world. Alignmently means showing up aligned with who we are in every interaction and engagement, or trying to. It's an impossible task to always do it. Yeah. But whether I'm talking to you, the human, or I'm talking to Vicki, the health bot, I still want to show up as me.
Right. And I think there's a slippery slope within social media that people, and I think it's something to look at.
Yeah.
Who are you being with the chat bot or with the person on the phone or with the faceless person on social media?
Right.
Because it speaks to, we may not be as happy and satisfied if we go down, letting our anger come out, or, there's nothing wrong with our reactions, but are we actually satisfied with who we're being when we interact that way and when we get frustrated? And
I think what's interesting, and I haven't really stopped to think about it until right now, is I think that slippery slope started with the phone, with how we had phone conversations, with how we, is it a telemarketer? I remember growing up, you acted very differently when a telemarketer, you would never just slam down a phone to someone calling. But if a telemarketer was calling, it was fine to be like, no, right? But that's changing how you are as a person and how you show up. And I think it has probably snowballed with social media, with being able to hide behind a computer screen, and now with AI. I think it's interesting. It almost, where the less we see and personally one-on-one engage and interact with people, maybe the less we hold ourselves to the standards of authenticity and how we want to show up in the world.
I would say that that's probably a true statement, and that we need to watch that. I think that's something that awareness of of how we're interacting technologically is changing how we're interacting
Yeah.
with other human beings. And on a, again, I'm having flurries of thoughts, but I find that being somebody who predominantly works over Zoom and on, or on my own, creating things and talking to people, that when I actually get in a room with people, there are two things that happen. One, it's like, wow, this is unfamiliar. And it's really nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a level of, this is really fun. So like, it's holiday season and I'm going to get to spend some time around some other humans. And I'm like, this is really cool.
Yeah.
And when I spend time with my sister who was here, I'm like, this human interaction, even though I'm getting it over Zoom, the in-person human interaction, the energy that's in the room is important.
It
And
is.
it does help ground me in who I am.
Yeah. It's much easier to feel the energy. I mean, I do a lot of work in what I call the energy impact model. And it's about when you have positive energy, the science shows you can have a greater, more positive impact.
Right.
When you have negative energy, same thing is true. You will have a greater, more negative impact, right?
Yes.
So, but when you're in rooms with people, you can tangibly feel the energy differently than even I can feel your energy based on your face and everything right now, based on the tone of your voice. But I'm not feeling the physical energy that changes when you walk into a room, right?
Yes.
And I think our brains know this, but we don't always reflect on this.
Yeah. And I think COVID was an interesting experiment in this, because
Yeah.
we discovered all sorts of technology that we can use.
Right.
And now that we've spent time in this world, it's the discovery that, yeah, being in that same space contributes. And so one of the things when you're like, yeah, that negative energy space or that positive energy space, one of the things that I like to help people do is when they get into that space where that negative energy is, to, again, awareness.
Yeah.
Oh, this is what's here. I don't have to take that on myself.
Right.
I can name it. I can label it. I can go, okay, there's some negative energy here and I don't have to take that on. And maybe my energy can influence this room in a different way, which you can't do unless you start to have some awareness of it.
Unless you know. But it goes back to what you said at the very beginning, which is something that we don't understand, which is we always have a choice. And reflection causes us to see, or allows us to see, what that choice is, what our next step can be.
Yeah.
And so you do get to decide what energy you bring into a room.
Right. And just the awareness is such a big deal, awareness and acceptance, and not judging ourselves for the fact that we're having this, but just being aware of who we're being and know that we do have that choice.
We have a choice.
Sometimes it takes a moment for us to recognize it and reflect on it, but it's
That's
always there.
Yeah.
And as providers of healthcare and as patients and receivers of healthcare, it's nice to know that we have a choice.
Yeah. So that leads us into the next question, which is, how do we get from where we are today to a future vision where we're all seeing each other in our humanity, we're showing up with purpose, all of the things that we have talked about here that can really change how we experience these different aspects of our life, including healthcare, but not limited to.
Well, I have all sorts of visions about how this can occur, but the first thing is it's one step at a time. It is one human action. It is one reflection at a time. And recognizing that I have reactions and other people have reactions, but everything comes down to one interaction. I'm having an interaction with you today. How are we either lifting each other up or tearing things apart?
Right.
So the interactions that I have with my clients, the interactions that I have when I speak, recognizing that I have the power to bring a positive energy to a space. And I think, that's all any of us can do.
Yeah.
Is we can be ourselves and we can recognize that we have power. That's where everything starts. I don't make a global change. I can't just walk outside and make a global change and say, hey, we're changing the way healthcare works. I can't do that. I can change who I am and I can show up with every single interaction, whether it's with a patient, client, whether it's with somebody who works at the hospital.
Yeah.
That is how things change. And so how does that change? That changes by us having more self-reflection and 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 growing in our understanding that everything that we do impacts other people.
Yeah. So that's a pretty strong call to action for our listeners here. So the first step, you said small steps, small actions, right? Which we know that that's how change occurs. I love that you said it not as implicitly as you said at the beginning, but we are all leaders, and leaders is understanding that we have that power, right? We
Mm-hmm.
have power of influence. Sometimes it's just over ourselves and our immediate environment,
Yeah.
but it also affects everyone we interact with. Like I tell people, my purpose is every day to enable happiness with every interaction I have. That is like, if I do that, that's great. So when I come into a conversation like this, that is my charge. That is what I do. That is how I lead, right?
Mhm.
And everyone has their own version of what that can be. And it sounds like what you're saying is reflect and figure out what that charge is for yourself. Figure out what that authentically feels like for you so that you can intentionally choose to show up and react in those ways.
Yeah, intention. Yeah, reflection and intention. Um, that's where everything starts. That's, whether people hire a coach,
Mm-hmm.
whether people read a book,
Mm-hmm.
there are so many different avenues to get to this awareness space.
Yeah.
I just want people to do that. I don't honestly, I don't care how you get there. But just to start understanding that there's more than the automatic reactions that we have.
Yeah. And what a wonderful world it would be if we start tapping into that knowledge and that wisdom that lies just beyond the reaction.
Yeah. It would be a beautiful place. And it's going to be a beautiful place because
it's going to be a beautiful place.
There is, just in spite of everything, I still believe that there is more good in humanity.
I'm with you.
I really do. News is news because it's unique and different.
Yeah.
Kindness and humanity doesn't make the news because it's not unique and different, which means
it's who we are.
Right. There's a lot more of it out there than we necessarily think about. And so I do believe that there is much positive within humanity, and that we do have the capabilities to make the world a better place for each other. Because that's the only point. The only reason to do anything is to actually make the world a better place for people.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So before we jump off, because I know we have we've gone through everything. Well, not everything. We could go on and on and on. But if you mentioned that you are a speaker, you mentioned that you do consulting work, you do coaching work, how can listeners reach out, learn more about what you're doing, all of that fun stuff?
Well, people can get a hold of me at vicki@vickilanders.com.
Okay.
That's my email address. My website is vickilanders.com.
Perfect.
I am a coach and I am a speaker, and I love to speak with organizations to help them recognize not only that they have a choice, but to give them some ideas about how to recognize what the choices are that they have. So I have a keynote that I speak to organizations that's, choose your lens, change your world.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on, sharing the work you do, sharing some ways for us to step into our power and do that work alongside you, and for just sharing your light and your purpose with the world.
Thank you for having me. This has been so much fun.
It has been. It really has.